How's everybody tonight? Can you guys hear me okay? My camera got moved. I um I don't have anything tonight really. It's gonna be a presentation from my good friend Robert.
Hey, Sean. How are you?
Hello, sir. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I think
I'm
everybody's in
delighted.
for a treat.
And guess what? As always, technical issues at the very end. With this time by the hand of OBS, with which my virtual camera is not working, but we'll make do. But that's why you're seeing a green screen behind me.
All good. You're seeing my downstairs living room. Um,
That's some
I
nice
had
wood you got over there.
well, thank you. I had to do a quick restart before I got on. I don't know if you saw me join and then leave. Um, if you're ready, you just let me know and you can take it away.
Okay. I will start do a quick test for the screen share,
All
and
right.
I would want you guys to let me know if you can see the screen, and we can take it from there. So is that visible?
It looks good on my end.
All right, I'll turn off my camera so that you don't have to deal with my ugly green screen. And bear with me. Let me know. You can still see the screen, right?
We got it. Yep.
All right, let's do another quick test with the actual demo content. One moment. Bear with me.
Are you okay with doing questions at the end too? I kind of forgot to ask that.
I'll charge for those, but why not? I'm kidding. I'll do it for free.
All right. Tony's paying anyway, so whatever. We got his credit card.
Let me know when you can see this.
Looks good.
All right, excellent. So I'll start with the presentation and we can get that going.
All right. I'll hop off the stage.
All right, one last audio check and video check. And let me know, folks, that you can see the content and you can hear me clearly. And I'll kick it right off. All righty. So sounds like we're good with sound and video. I won't be seeing the Discord chat. So if there's anything, I would want you, Sean, to interject and let me know, okay? Because I'll have, I'm doing the presentation. So audience wise, we have some folks and whoever else can join later, but we'll get started now. So hello hackers, welcome to Hacker Hermanos conceptual overview of the topic staged versus stageless payloads. We'll do a demo at the end. The agenda today, which is not a political one, as you can see, we're going to be doing an overview of what is the concept of a payload. We'll do a concept or definition of a staged payload. We'll go over the functioning of a staged payload, as well as pros and cons of staged payloads. After that, we'll follow the same exact format and we'll do a definition of stageless payloads. We'll talk about their functioning. We'll talk about some pros and cons of stageless payloads and a comparison, a final single view comparison of them. At the end, I'll do my best to fumble through a demo in which we'll use the Metasploit framework and show how the traffic differs when you're running a staged payload versus when you're running a stageless payload. Without further ado, let's get into it. So the situation is the following. You've been hired to assess a company's security in a red team campaign, which is great. You've just completed the reconnaissance phase and you came up with a good phishing pretext and attached your malware in an email to send it to a target user. Before we go any further, I want to let you know that this is not the only context or time in which you'd be using a payload, but this is a great example in my opinion. If they click your payload, you will gain control of their workstation. We talked a little bit about this during the command and control framework series. And what you're attaching in the email for the target user is your payload. I want to make that very clear. Here's the issue. It doesn't matter how good you are finding out public information about a target, since you're being hired to demonstrate the impact of exploiting its users. Processes and technical controls are also in scope for findings. That's when payloads come into play. So, what exactly is a payload in the context of offensive security, and why is it significant? Well, I would say that the payload is referring to the malware or the code that performs the intended malicious action on the target system. And it usually comes into play after the exploitation is completed, and that would lead us into the post exploitation phase. Our actions from here on demonstrate the potential consequences of a real world attack. And the post exploitation goals can range from gathering sensitive information and extracting it to even disrupting normal operations or deploying ransomware in a network. Since we're ethical professionals, we're obviously doing these actions in a very controlled manner. So, staging answers limitations that can be found in certain scenarios, such as, let's say that you found a system that is exploitable, but the exploit or the vulnerability that you're going to abuse to run your malicious code only allows you to load code of a certain size. If that is the case, you would want to fit in some instructions that will allow you to bring in more functionality in a different step. And this is where the staged payloads come into play. Okay. The first stage fits the amount of space available given the specific exploitable vulnerability. And then once this stager gets executed on the target, it reaches out to the handler or the listener. That's what we're seeing here in the number 2. So first we have that stager fetches out to the handler or connects to the handler to fetch the second stage, which is then sent to the computer or the target and is running the actual functionality that will allow you to control that machine. Keep in mind that this does not have to be a 2-stage process. There can be n number of stagers for a natural number, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It all depends. And they can keep doing similar actions, like going and fetching some other code from somewhere else that tells it to do something else, etc. After all of this is done, which is what you're seeing on step number 3, the main payload is loaded into the memory of the target. Okay? This payload sends, in this case, a reverse shell, which is just a command interpreter, which will allow the attacker interactive access to run commands in the target. At this point, the target has established a connection back to the listener or the handler, which in the case of the screenshot is the C2 server, as you can see under the staged banner. And in our case will be Metasploit payload. You'll see also in the demo portion of the presentation. So let's talk about the functioning of a staged payload. They're, like I was saying, written to optimize for size. So we want to make them as small as possible. And this also implies that they have only the necessary functionality or instructions to retrieve the rest of the code from the stager handler and load it into the memory, nothing else. A small stager has also the following benefits, which is that it allows freedom to use it with more exploits, make it possible to abuse situations of limited memory available, like the one that I was giving at the beginning as an example, to abuse a specific vulnerability in which, let's say that you can fit 100 kilobytes of a payload, but you couldn't fit 1 megabyte, right? Then at that point, you'll need to do whatever you need to do to gain control of that machine within the space available in memory. Or, the buffer, the vulnerability, it really all depends. It doesn't even have to be in memory or in a buffer. There's many ways. Also, a smaller size means less opportunities for detection. This is what you'll hear in industry referred to as detection surface. In the example that we're seeing on the screen, this one I grabbed from the CobbleStrike blog written by Raphael Much. He's the author of the CobbleStrike framework. It's a command and control framework. In number 1, you're seeing it connect to the handler, opening a socket. You'll see on number 2 that is reading the length of the payload into a 4-byte unsigned integer in native byte order. All this is meaning is putting this code that is encoded in a specific way so that it can read, I believe, hexadecimal format, but I'll have to get back to you on that. I can't remember off the top of my head. Moving on in number 3, it's allocating some space in memory with certain permissions. This is the space that it's going to be written with the full shellcode of the payload that is fetching from the C2 server. Or the listener, really, the second stage or the subsequent stage after the stager does not need to be on the C2 server. That just to be clear. Well, on number 4, we're copying the file descriptor from step 1 into the memory buffer. This is what actually makes that payload be available in memory. In number 5, we're reading that payload from the socket into our memory buffer that was allocated in number 3. So we made the space, we copied the payload from the socket, which is the network connection, into the space that we made in memory, which is the buffer here. And now we're copying the value of that socket into the buffer. We start reading those bytes, and we cast a function which will effectively execute the payload. So if we talk about pros and cons of the staged payload, if we stage it, it's possible to deliver multiple different payloads with the same stager. This is a pro. And as a condition, the payload must be compatible with the stager. We will see once in the demo we set the specific payload that we'll use. We generate the payload. We'll see that we'll need to set up the listener with the specific payload that we're using. Otherwise, it won't serve the subsequent stages. Therefore, when we are in the, oops, I'm not sure if you can see the screen still. When we are having some issues here. When we are in step number, oh my God, why does this keep changing?
We can see your screen.
You're seeing the presentation still?
Yep.
Okay, sorry for that. Yeah, so I was saying, if we don't have the specific payload configured in the listener, when the stager reaches out, let's say that we had a listener with a stageless payload, and we run a stager for a subsequent stage, it won't serve the stage. It will just expect a connection happening. So essentially, you need to have both ends coordinated so that once the stager reaches out, the listener knows to serve the payload that it needs. If you have, on the other hand, a stageless payload configured, and you have a listener configured with a stager, then obviously at that point it's expecting to serve a payload or shellcode instead of a connection being established. Now, other benefits of staged payloads is that sometimes, or back in the day, this is not as common anymore for other considerations such as behavioral detections and heuristics. Antivirus evasion, being a concern, was addressed with staging. Obviously, the stage 0 doesn't embed the final executable into itself or on the disk. It loads it itself from memory and doesn't provide as much detection surface, being that the stager is the only thing that touches the disk. If also it is caught, let's say that the defender team, forensics, incident response is able to get a hold or a copy of the stager that you used, they'll only have access to the stager. And that will, provide them some level of information as to where this stager is connecting to fetch payloads. But it's not as much as they have your full payload and, they can analyze what C2 framework or, what your malware is really doing. Okay. It's like more like they have I'll use an example of, let's say that we have some birds. It's the difference between having a bird that you attach a dynamite stick to a leg and you send it into a cave. That bird goes and places the dynamite there, versus a bird that finds a suitable spot. This is the memory buffer allocation, and goes and fetches another bird that is more capable and hefty and can bring the actual dynamite. Please know that I didn't harm any birds during the ideation of this example. Let's say also that for the screenshots, we're seeing 3 types of payloads. This is what I was referring to, and we'll see more in detail when we're actually doing the demo, in which we're selecting the type of payload that we need for each listener. In the case of number 1, we're selecting a 32-bit payload for Windows. In the case of number 2, 64-bit. In number 3, we're using a more esoteric one like an Android payload. And for the purpose of your preparation in the certification, you'll want to know what payload is appropriate for your target. Let's say that you found a suitable target and a Windows machine. If you try to run a Android payload or a Linux payload, it is unlikely that that'll work. It won't work at all. I say unlikely because, like any rule, there's exceptions and there's situations in which things are cross-compatible, perhaps with some compromises, but those are edge cases. And for the majority of the cases, I recommend you are very sure of what system you're targeting with what payload. Okay. Now, if we talk about the disadvantages of staged payloads, they also have detection risk. I know I mentioned that, in some scenarios, antivirus detections and a lower detection surface is true because you don't have the whole shellcode, as we'll see in the next slide. But because the stager needs to go and fetch some more code, and we can see that here. I'm having the same issue again. 1 second. Okay. Because the stager needs to go and fetch more code, this network connection, if there's a, let's say, intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system or firewall, those connections are information that is being provided to the defenders and the security team that can say, hey, that they can use to determine, hey, there's something unusual going on. Let's say unusual, right? Some of the other disadvantages, let's say, is that you have the dependency on an external server, which is where you're serving your payload from. If you don't have access to this server because it's down, it's unreachable, and the network failed in that moment, or even the payload delivery fails, it can make the exploit ineffective because at that point, perhaps you did get code execution on the system abusing a vulnerability, or you had a target employee or victim click on your payload on your stager. If you cannot reach where to fetch the rest of the payload, then effectively you're dead in the water. You're not going to get your payload executed. This, back to our example with the birds and the cave and the situation. This is like the first bird that found a suitable spot to put the dynamite in, but they weren't able to reach the second bird, which is actually going to deliver that explosive charge, right? There's also the potential for the payload to be corrupted during transmission. This would obviously lead failure when executing the rest of the shellcode. And like I was mentioning, the bigger consideration of compatibility. Not all payloads are compatible with all stagers, in which case you want to make sure that you have a proper fit there, okay? Now let's move on to stageless payloads. Stageless payloads refer to artifacts that run malicious code without the staging process or without fetching it from somewhere else. I want you to think about it as the whole package. What you're seeing on the screen is a hexadecimal format for shellcode being written to a shellcode.bin file. That's what you can see here in the line that says shellcode.bin. Let me see if I can activate the cursor. I hope you can see my the laser thing. Can anybody confirm?
We
Let me
can
check
see
the chat.
that, yep.
Okay, perfect. So all this is doing is putting these bytes to a variable. This is in hexadecimal, and these bytes are instructions that are in binary. Okay, something that you can see to allude to that is the extension here. They're not in binary as you're seeing them represented on the screen, but they would be interpreted in binary, is what I'm getting at with the program. And as you can see, once the file is created, this is the representation of a binary file when you're looking at it from a interactive command interpreter. Okay. In this case, this shellcode.bin is a stageless payload. Okay, and they contain all of the configuration necessary to connect back to the listener in a single package. If we go back to contrast to the staged payload, to do the example of what this is not, this doesn't go and fetch more code. It has all the code that it needs to give you access, okay? If we're talking about the command and control. Because not all payloads really are for command and control. There could be a payload for a ransomware, there could be a payload for whatever your brain desires. This is really just a program, okay? Now, an important aspect of any sort of payload, whether it's staged or stageless, but in this case, I wanted to bring this up in the stageless portion because ultimately, this is what you'll be generating to drop on disk, or to send as an executable, or even to load from memory if you have a loader. But that's a little bit outside of this, and I don't want to add additional complexity to a topic that can be daunting already for a beginner. So the formats in which these payloads can be maintained is not only binary .bin. Okay. Also, as a curiosity, another alternative format for .bin is .raw. Okay. I don't know if you've used digital photography, but DSLR cameras usually get pictures in that format. Okay. So other formats for payloads can be portable executables like exe files, like more commonly seen in Windows. Dynamic link libraries like DLLs, that is Delta Lima Lima, also commonly seen in Windows. Executable and linkable format, these are more in the Linux world. .elf. PowerShell, which are literally script instructions of the PowerShell language that contain all the necessary logic to provide a interactive connection back to a C2 server, if we continue on that example. Also shellcode in hexadecimal, which is what you're seeing on the screen, and what is referred to as C strings, which are just the string format, the format for text in the C language. Now, when dealing with the situations in which we need to be stealthy or trick a target into thinking that our payloads are not dangerous, we, red teamers, we can use more esoteric formats like protected interoperable file format, that is .pif, which is normally an audio or a video container file. That's something I had a lot of success very recently on an engagement back in September. And I even used control panel files, .cpl, recently. And each tool of the control panel is represented by a CPL file, like when you go on your Windows system folder. And you can see things like sound, Windows updates. So I crafted one of these container files and I put my payload in them. I put it in the system and got my payload to execute, similar with the .pif. When debriefing with the blue team, they were laughing because, that was it's not an uncommon thing, right? But it was kind of a creative use of a malicious program to put in an audio file. Okay. So how do stageless payloads work? This is an interesting topic as well. What you're seeing on the right-hand side on the screen, before we get into topic here, is code from a gentleman called Stephen Fewer. And I found that it was appropriate to give him a shout out because he wrote the logic, and we'll go into that, what is the loader, but he wrote the logic that allows command and control frameworks like Metasploit and CobbleStrike to inject their payloads into memory, okay? In the case of a payload from Metasploit or CobbleStrike, we have what's called a self-bootstrapping reflective DLL loader. That's a mouthful, but this all means that, at least in the case of Windows payloads, there is a Windows DLL, dynamic link library, like we were saying earlier, compiled with a reflective loader function. Let's break that down even further. So normally, a loader function will load a program into memory in the case of a portable executable file like an exe. So you just double-click the exe, boom, you have the program running. In the case of a DLL, normally, DLLs, if you try to click them, you'll get the whole wizard or I don't know if interrogation is the right word, but you'll get some interaction from the system, like a window pop up, asking you, what do you want to open this file with? Because this is not a file that, unlike exes, you just double click and something will happen, right? Normally, DLLs are called by other programs that use functions and logic inside them. So I want you to think of the DLL as, I don't know, a reference book or a reference manual that contains some other instructions that programs want to use. And so that developers don't have to write the same functions and logic over and over and over, because this would be insane and also not even scalable, they just pack them into these libraries and they reference the library when they need something. Okay? Unlike other DLLs, however, this DLL uses the loader, and this is just a very small part of the program. Okay, I'm putting the link on the slide of this source code where you can find it in GitHub, because this is public. And this is part of a C file, okay, for the reflective loader. But this has also header files. It has many other files in that project, okay? But I wanted to show it to you so you could see it with your own eyes, because it took me a while to grasp this level of understanding of how Metasploit was doing what in CobbleStrike. And I figured that it'd be nice to understand, how the sausage is made, type of thing, right? And they say that a lot on my job. I figured to use the figure of speech. So now we determined that normal DLLs are usually used by other programs. But what is the difference here? Why does this matter? Why are we seeing this code on the screen and this gentleman smiling at us? Well, unlike other DLLs, this DLL loads itself into memory without another program. The mechanism is the reflective DLL loader that I was referring to earlier. And like I was saying also, Metasploit and CobbleStrike use the code that we can see on the screen or modified versions of it. CobbleStrike has recently expanded its feature set for folks like you and I that use the software to write our own reflective DLL, because this has become a easy, or not easy, I don't want to, underestimate the work of anyone, but this has become a common way of detecting the use of payloads, right? The fact that something is being loaded into memory, right? Now, that in CobbleStrike specifically is implemented through the user-defined reflective DLL loader. Or user-defined reflective loader, yeah. So moving on from this, let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the stageless payloads, okay? So stageless. They're simple and reliable. We have everything contained into one package. It's delivered and executed in one go. Because of this, there's fewer steps where things could go wrong. They also don't depend on an egress server connecting to deliver further stage. And also, stageless is better if you have egress traffic or domain resolutions being restricted that could prevent the delivery of further stage to occur. Okay, you still need to figure out if the payload that you're running on the system, whether stageless or staged, needs to have an egress channel for your C2 connections. Okay, or whether it's a bind connection, it still needs to have ingress traffic allowed. But at this point, I'm probably getting too much in the weeds about that. They also have reduced network footprint, meaning that they don't require additional network connections to download further stages. So in terms of network monitoring, they might be less detectable, and the transfer of a stage wouldn't be intercepted by a proxy or interrupted if anything went wrong with the communications, right? Like there's machines that sit in between destinations in the public internet or other aspects of or other parts of the network and inspect traffic. Sometimes these referred to as forward proxies can break connectivity, like for a stager type of action. Okay, stageless payloads also have a marginal faster execution, meaning that they don't need to connect to the handler or payload server to get the payload running. As soon as the stageless payload is executed, then obviously we can get the connection to the C2 established or the actions on objectives. Okay, that meaning deploying a ransomware or whatever else our payload has for logic. So I want you to picture the case in which the execution of a stager is fetching a payload and then running it, and it being too slow. Not all payloads need to leave a long-standing callback connection to a C2 infrastructure. we were using the example of ransomware, we can also use the example of a stealer that is looking to, steal some information and upload it or stash it away for the adversary to come and retrieve it later, or send it directly to the internet in a data exfiltration mechanism. And this could be all happening in a highly protected or restricted environment. Well, wouldn't you want the encryption activity to occur, or the action that you're going to take in that objective, as soon as possible? Well, that's a good scenario or a good reason to use a stageless payload, in which you know that as soon as the execution occurs, the action that you want or the result that you want, whether it's connecting to your C2 or encrypting or whatever it is, will happen ASAP. Okay. The disadvantages, of course. Well, stageless payloads are larger. Sometimes they're considerably larger. I want you to think about the difference between kilobytes and megabytes. There are obviously extreme cases like Sliver C2, where payloads can be more than 20 megabytes in size. Plus, if you do some other work to enhance or obfuscate your payload, they can get even bigger. 20 megabytes for a payload is massive, by the way. If no other obfuscation or defense evasion mechanism is in place, then stageless payloads provide more detection surface. Obviously, there's more code, it's bigger, you have more opportunities for detection. Whether we're talking about signatures, there's more code that can be matched against in terms of, hey, I've seen that string, that word inside the file, and you can do this from a Linux terminal using the strings command and passing the file name as an argument. You'll see all the strings being dumped, even if it's an executable. There's also less flexibility once it is delivered. Let's say that you have your stageless payload and suddenly you delivered it and you realize that you needed to change something. Well, you're out of luck. You're going to have to find a way to deliver another payload and have it again executed. Sometimes this is not even a problem, depending on how well versed your target is or how robust the processes are in terms of not clicking weird stuff. But there's that. I'm going to show a table for comparison. You may want to take a screenshot of this. Otherwise, I'll make the slides available. And essentially, most of the things that we talked about, if not all, should be on this table in terms of the comparison between stager and stageless. All right. After that, we have some time for questions. I'm going to take a look at the chat now and see if anyone has any questions so far. Otherwise, we'll proceed into the demo. L30, I'm glad to see you again. Lazar, thank you for making it. Birdie, Sosi, Malik. Medusa XX, Human what is that? Information Hazard? That's a cool name. IDK Chicken Barbecue. I'm with that. Sir Eats a Lot. I should have taken that name. Full Canelli. Hey, how you doing, man? Glad to see you. Fox Decay. Oh, look at Tony supporting. My heart melts. Muhibullah. Thank you for making it. Morgan 41. Our very own Evil Pistachio. Kumomonomu. I dig that name. The cat in your profile looks really cool. I want to live like that. Denied Soccer Ball. I like soccer. I grew up playing soccer in Spain. Balonly, we talked a couple days ago. I hope your assignment is going well. And Garesh, thank you for making it. I'm glad you folks like the stickers. Just hit me up on LinkedIn. Be able to share a address that you're comfortable with. I won't do anything fishy or let me know when you can see me. I guess that one silver lining of the green screen and OBS not working is that I can show this very nicely. Can you see that? That's a holographic sticker. And this one is a non-holographic with the fists from Hacker Hermanos. So if you like one of these, let me know. We'll ship them to you at no cost. Glad to do it. The We'll send you one with the with the QR code L30. Don't worry, I figure that if I'll invest the resources into stickers, put some QR for a shameless shout out to ourselves. And very soon we'll have also a website in which we'll cover all the links and the things that we're working on and posting. So enough sticker talk, because we're here to study stageless and staged payloads. I'm going to get going with the demo. I'm going to close OBS in the meantime also to save some resources.
Shout out to B Dubs too. I think she's the only one that's been to every study group. I think. If I missed you and you've been to every study group, I'm sorry.
Well, that consistency is what gets you to learn, so I commend that. Let me know when you can see the demo. Folks, no questions about the concept that we talked about, stageless versus staged?
I'm
Want to make sure
Falconelli
this
and
is...
L30. I love you guys too. I'm sorry.
Hey, I wouldn't mess with Fulcanelli, man. He's shown me some crazy physical security stuff.
I
Not that
got
he
an email
would,
from
but
him earlier. It was kind of sketchy. I didn't click on anything.
definitely don't. All right, let me know when you can see the screen with the command line and the Windows target. Okay, they're up. I'm getting a confirmation. I'll ask one last time if there's any questions on what we discussed about the presentation, because otherwise we're going to get these payloads running. We're going to see how we generate them, and we'll see what the traffic looks like. And I'll also break down what the packet capture I have set up, so I can see this, and you folks can also reproduce it at home. Okay, no questions so far. All right. If you end up having a question, then please obviously put it in the chat, and we can address it on the and after we're done with the demo. Okay. So let's first start with the payload generation. Okay. Let's say that your company or Tony's company, Slyfox company, hired you for a red team engagement, and you're going to target Tony. Well, the first thing you want to do is generate your payload. I'm sure that you've already come up with a great pretext that he will not doubt a single time before clicking on whatever you're going to send him. And for this case, we're going to use Metasploit. So we'll use MSF Venom tool to generate a payload. I have both commands pulled up on the screen. And before I continue, is this easy to read?
It looks good on my end.
All right. Does anyone not have a fancy screen like Sean that can't see nothing? Sir eats a lot. Okay. Have you clicked on the stream picture or video? L30 confirms good visual. Sir eats a lot. I'll give you a moment, see if you can find that that button. It should be on the Discord itself, on the Discord app, and it should allow you to see the screen.
I put Robert's LinkedIn in the chat while we're waiting. And we do have one question if you want to take it now.
Human information hazard. So WinINet needs. WinINet is a library or a function for making connections to the internet, like HTTP connections, if I'm not mistaken, or I believe you can do any sort of TCP connection. I don't have a lot of experience with that library in itself. However, what I do know is that there are other libraries that come baked into the Windows operating system. I'll pull up Cobalt Strike in a moment. I'll have to do that off the video because I don't own that software. I have it from my employer, and I'll check the other option. But Cobalt Strike at least allows you to select one of those functions that come preloaded in the Windows operating system. And the reason it comes to be when in the context of payloads is because, like we were talking about in the stager side of things, we want to use the least amount of code possible, okay, to achieve that whole fetching the payload and grabbing it. So in that scenario, we then use some of the functionality that already exists in the operating system in the case of Windows, okay? And WinINet is one of those. I believe that is WinINet or the other one that I'm blanking on the name right now horribly, that comes baked in the Internet Explorer. If you remember the Internet Explorer browser, one of those APIs is used by that browser. Okay. I hope that answers your question. And if you want a deeper dive, human information hazard, I can prepare that and get back to you. And we can see if we can write a program using each of those or something like that. I'm probably getting myself shown in a lot of trouble right now, but we'll figure it out for you folks. So no worries there. All right. If sir, it's a lot. Were you able to see the video stream? Not yet. Okay, let me see if I can take a screenshot of my own Discord app, and perhaps that can help you get yourself situated. Slyfox is volunteering himself to help with the demo of the WinINet implementation. It could be WinHTTP. I just don't remember off the top of my head, and I don't want to lie to you folks. But it's very possible it's that one. Kumamunomo. So, sir, it's a lot. I'm recommending clicking on the one that says, in the speaker section, the one that says the video. I'll give you another few seconds before we start with the demo. I don't want to leave anyone behind. I see 2 squares circling. Huh. Do you want, is anybody else?
Issue.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay, but you can hear good. Continue. Sean, are we recording this session by any chance?
This is recorded, and I will put a link to my YouTube at the end.
Excellent. So we'll have to continue. Sir, it's a lot. I don't want to lose more people, so let's take a look then at these payloads. We have the scenario that we discussed. We're gonna send some nasty stuff to Slyfox. Good luck in your engagement tomorrow. Thanks for the support. We'll keep hacking you without you being here. So we're gonna send Tony some nasty stuff. All right. We're going to start with a stageless payload because it's simpler, I guess. And we're going to generate that with MSF Venom. Okay. You'll come into your penetration testing certifications and you'll need to generate your payloads. And like we said, you want to determine, what is a suitable system. In this case, we have a Windows system on the left-hand side of the screen, which we can see. With system info. Okay, obviously Windows, System32, etc. We know the architecture based on the system info output on system type, 64 bits. Okay, so we know platform and architecture. We're going to get a suitable payload for that, which is the Windows x64 interpreter. We're going to use port 80 and the protocol HTTP. Is anyone else having issues with the video stream loading? Okay, sounds like we're good to go. All right. For this payload, I want you to take a look at the small detail here. The stageless one has the name of the payload in one string altogether. Okay. You'll see here interpreter underscore reverse underscore HTTP, whereas the staged payload has a / between interpreter and reverse HTTP. In the Metasploit MSF console suite of exploits and C2 framework, you'll find this nomenclature that will visually allow you to determine whether you're setting up a stageless payload or a staged payload. Okay, so let's go first with the staged payload. We hit enter. We're saving that payload in the exe format. We're making sure that when the payload is killed or the exit command is used, the process is killed. And we're outputting it to our temp folder with the name of stageless underscore HTTP 80. Okay. Now we have that payload generated. Okay. No issues so far. Now we also are using the Metasploit multi-handler. This is the listener side of the stager, but also it doubles as a listener to catch any reverse connection occurring from a stageless payload if it's using a reverse connection, or it could also be used to connect to a bind connection. Bind and reverse are two different types of payload, and obviously the bind one is the one that opens a port on the target, whereas the reverse one connects to a port you have open on your C2. Okay, in this case, we're using reverse ones for the sake of the example, and we're going to use the stageless one first. Okay, so we set the payload to meterpreter underscore reverse HTTP. I want you to take a look once again at our stageless payload. That is the exact same thing we're using here. We're going to take a look at the options. And for these options, we have the payload as the stageless payload. We're going to modify the listener port and listener hostname to match what the payload is configured with, which in this case is listener host, the IP address of my C2, 192.168.1.166, and listener port 80 TCP. All right, this needs to match. Otherwise, our reverse connection won't get established. So we're going to set the listening port as 80. We're going to set the listening host as the IP address with which that interface is addressed with, which in this case is 192.168.1.166. Once we have those options set up, we show options once again to show that they've been modified. We can run our listener for the stageless payload, and we'll go about executing our payloads, which I have here in the payloads folder. And I already made the transfer to make this smooth, but in the case of a lab like this, I just copy and paste. If you're doing a CTF or perhaps your exam certification for penetration testing, normally you have to find a way to transfer those payloads to bring them into the target system, whether that is using a living off the land binary like certutil or bitsadmin, whatever the case. Sometimes you can just upload them into an actual folder in a web application, but that's on you to determine during your exam or the CTF challenge you're doing. So now we're going to run our stageless payload. All right. And here at the bottom, we have the Wireshark packet capture program so that we can take a look at this traffic in real time. Okay. I'm going to run the payload and you'll see a lot of traffic start getting exchanged. All right. We're seeing how immediately we're getting some messages on our multi-handler. Okay. The multi-handler prompt changes to meterpreter. And now we can see that we have access to our target system. If I do get UID, I am seeing the information of the user from my target system. Okay. Now let's focus on the packet capture here for a moment. And we'll use this to see the differences between I'm going to open another Wireshark window so that we can compare it with the staged. Okay. But before I do that, I'm going to exit the program that the payload ran, which is meterpreter in this case, and that is going to allow this traffic exchange to stop. Okay. I'm going to also stop the packet capture, and we're going to leave it parked there for now. And in the meantime, I'm going to configure my staged listener. Okay, so the first one was stageless, and all it did, it was immediately went and established a connection with Metasploit. Okay, there was no fetching, no payload, none of that stuff. It just connected. All right, connected on port 80 also. We can see that port 80 here. Here, these two numbers that have the arrow pointing to the right-hand side are showing the source port, which in this case is 52,261, connecting to port 80. And the connection direction for this specific packet is from the target IP, which is 192.168.1.192. We can validate that here with an IP config. I do this fine string to filter just the IP before, because otherwise the output of this is unruly, and I don't want to bore you with that. So here you can see for this interface, it's assigned with that IP address that is shown in the packet capture. On the other hand, my C2 machine has IP address 192.168.1.166. I have it in my message of the day, in my banner, when I connect to it over SSH, or I open a new interactive session on the terminal so that it's easy for me to reference. But we can also reference the same thing by filtering similar to ipconfig. IPA has a big output, so we can use grep awk to manipulate the output and just show what we're interested in. All right. In this case, we can see that the C2 server has an IP address of 192.168.1.166, which is what we had just configured for our L host. In this case, the same L host configuration and L port configuration is going to be used now in this case with the staged payload. And after we validated what that IP address is for your perusal, we set the payload to use the staged payload, the listener to use the staged payload. We set the L host to the IP address of the C2 server. We set the L port to port 80. We run our listener so that it's going to handle when that stager asks for the rest of the code. And what we'll do here is divide the screen so we can show both packet captures, and we can take a look at some differences, all right? We're obviously not going to delve into every single exchange of data, because in the quick moments that we had that payload running, there were hundreds of packets already exchanged, all right? There's a lot of chatter here. Now, let's, in the top half of the screen, apply the same filter. All this filter is filtering the traffic that is going to and from the C2 server and the target, and it ensures that only traffic between those two machines and port 80 is shown. All right, I do that because if we don't, I'll just give you a quick glance. It would be absolutely insane the amount of traffic that we'll see, especially on a Windows machine. Give me a moment. Not sure why it's not being displayed, but I can generate some traffic. See if that will help. Or not. Not sure what's going on. Am I on the right interface? Should be. 192.168. Yep, this is the one. So I'm not sure how I managed to not get this one right, but stuff happens. No interface selected. I did select an interface. I thought so. Start. Nope. Power filter. Take the filter out. Okay. Yeah, this is what I was referring to. There's a lot of traffic that is normally being sent as part of the network. The applications in the Microsoft Windows operating system are constantly sending telemetry or information about the system to various sources, and that's a different discussion that I'm not going to get into now. And so that's why we filter that traffic with the filter. No como monomu. The filter was not applied. That's what I wanted to show. That's why the filter is necessary. If I don't apply the filter, we could be here all night without even finding the relevant traffic. All right. So now that we're ready, without further ado, I'm going to run the stager payload, and we're going to see what's different here. All right. You can see stager underscore HTTP 80, which we had generated here. Stager underscore HTTP 80. Just hit enter so that you can see what that looks like. Exactly the same as the bottom one. It just generates the payload and saves it to your output folder. The only thing that changes between these two, because the listening host and listening port is exactly the same, format is the same, name changes, but also the payload that that's been selected with MSF Venom. All right. Even the architecture and the platform are the exact same. So I'm going to run that payload, and we can see the traffic here in the top half of the screen. And bear with me because I believe I misnamed a stageless payload by stager. So the reason I can tell that is because I see automatically that as soon as I executed it, it went and first it didn't connect to our handler. That's the first give out, but it did establish a connection immediately, and I'm not sure that I see the transfer of the payload, but I could be wrong. Let's try that again. I'm going to transfer the payload to ensure that it's a stager payload. It's just that the traffic up on a glance didn't seem to me like traffic for a stager payload, but I could be wrong. And the reason I say I could be wrong too is because I'm seeing here now this reassembled PDUs, which are just segments of TCP packets that are being sent again, and also the push. But that's also, I'm sure we can find those here as well. Just bear with me. Let me regenerate this payload, and we can transfer it again. So let me get to my terminal program.
Is it all right if I give you a quick little promotion while we're doing that?
Absolutely, we can promote anybody to the rank that you want.
We're gonna see we're gonna see you for Thirsty Thursday
Oh,
coming up, which I just linked in the chat.
thanks for that, Sean. Really
This
appreciate it.
Thursday with InfoSec Pat.
Should be a fun chat about red teaming, career in general. I don't think it will be a technical deep dive, but
Will
we'll
there
be
be
chatting
drinking
about things.
involved? Is that what Thirsty Thursday is?
You know what? I am not sure, Sean. So if it is the case, they're gonna catch me by surprise. To be quite honest with you. Okay, so all I did was pull the staged payload that I had just generated to temp stager underscore HTTP underscore 80. I brought that to my local file system, and then I copied that into my virtual machine that we're running here. I'm going to reset the packet capture, and we're going to run that again after setting up the listener again. And the reason for that is I want to make sure that this is an actual staged payload. I might be wrong, but I don't see here the whole message of sending staged. So hopefully we see that now. Let's run that. I might be noobing out here, and this might be all good because we just ran the payload with the actual parameters. The only issue that I'm seeing is that this does not seem very different. So is the issue my stager payload? Let's see. Let's see the first packet here. Going from the target to the C2 server, then SYNAC ACK, that's a TCP handshake, and then immediately the get on the URI where the HTTP listener is, okay, which is a randomly generated URI with high entropy, okay? Let's take a look at this one, and we're seeing the exact same pattern. If I zoom in here, SYNAC ACK, and connection to the HTTP listener. Now, is the problem that I'm confused here because it reaches out to this URI to serve the next stage? and then when it switches to, and this push and ACK are the transfer of the payload itself, and then we should see another more frequent connection on 80. Or why is that happening? Let's see if we see the same push. No, we don't have the pushes here. So I think that everything is going as expected. It's just me being silly. Let's see, push ACK. I will look into this deeper just to make sure that I'm interpreting this correctly. But I am not seeing much difference between these two packet captures. If we take a look at our payload generation, they're certainly using different payloads. And if we look at our options for the handler, so that's a good question. If 80 is busy, let's see why that could be or not be the case. If we go to a task list and we find string for 80 or HTTP or stage, we see. Okay, hold on. Let's close that filter more. Stager, stageless. Okay, so neither of them are running right now because I exited the session. All right. So let's start with one of them. That is the stager. Let's check out the options. This is definitely a stager payload. We run, click stager. We know that that traffic is, oh, I should have cleared the traffic, but capture. Let's kill this. It's also possible that doing it with a TCP payload might be more evident on the wire. I guess we can try that as well. TCP. We're going to use port 80 as well. We're going to use a stageless in TCP. As you can see, also another point from the presentation is the size. If you notice here, this one is 200 kilobyte versus 7 kilobyte. As you can see, also another, so that's a considerable size between stageless and staged. Let's grab both the TCP ones. 200 kilobyte file system versus 7 kilobyte. Copy them into the folder. As you can see, also another, so that's a considerable size between stageless. Let's clear packet captures staged and get that going once again. Let's grab both the TCP ones. 200 kilobyte file system versus, let's put 7 our listener on the right payload. Set payload. Oh, I'm an interpreter, that's why. Reverse TCP, and this one is going to be for the stager. Options, we have the same listening host, listening port. Things are looking good. The payload option is set. And do we have another handler running? Fail to bind. These are not running, so why would you fail to bind here? Now we're looking for open ports to see what is listening on port 80. Seems like Metasploit is. Oh, because of the session that we got going on. That could be probably the issue. So we can. Could be the problem. But since the process is not running on the machine here, I think that that's why this is so hung up here. So let's validate open ports again. And we're still got port 80 listening. So let me kill those. Okay, let's start it again. All right, 80. Conflict is gone. These are the amazing things of doing a live presentation. Yeah, that's a good point. West, also what those allow you to do is set up multiple applications in one single compute resource, as long as you don't have conflicts in the resources with the containers, that is. We're going to use a reverse TCP stager payload. We're going to set lhost to the IP address of the server. We're going to set lport to port 80. We're going to run that. That handler is running now. We make sure that in the target, no payload processes are running, and we're going to run the stager payload, TCP. And the reason for that is we want to see the traffic. Okay, here we can see the sending stage. This is a little bit more clear. And in the packet capture, we're seeing the three-way TCP handshake. And then this push and ACK pattern is common of file transfer. And this is exactly what's happening with the first stage, sending the payload. And after that, it should be more of a TCP connection maintaining. Second. See if we can send some more traffic as an example. Get UID. I guess I will continue to see the ACK and push, but that should be changing as we run commands or get information. So it's a push ACK, push ACK, because it's very small amounts of traffic being sent. Let's see what other traffic we can cause to happen here. If we start also with a directory listing, that will also cause more traffic to be sent. I'm trying to see if there's a distinct pattern here between the shellcode transferring and sending smaller pieces of data back and forth, which obviously we can see here from the push and just send the traffic and ACK, and that's very small, versus the consistent pattern of ACKs for a shellcode transfer, which are sent in a sequence, so that because of the TCP protocol being stateful, it allows the program to determine if something is missed along the way. Okay. Now, let's get out of this session and let's set up a stageless listener. Set Windows 64. And in this case, since we're using stageless, we can see here the meterpreter _ reverse TCP, which on the other one was / meterpreter / reverse TCP. So we set the payload options. We have the same lhost and lport, and we have our TCP stageless listener, meaning that there will not be a execution of sending a second stage afterward. All right, so it'd just be the connection to receive the reverse shell. Now, let's take a look at our. We're gonna have the payload running, so we can do that now. And we'll set up the packet capture before we started the TCP one, because that's the payload that we're running here, reverse TCP. And we'll clear the traffic in the bottom side of the screen, and hopefully we can see some different pattern in the traffic, which will be more akin to a back and forth, a short back and forth without a long transfer of traffic or data. Okay. Now let's do that now. Stageless connects the session, and if you notice here, and if you've used Metasploit before, you will recognize that a stageless payload does not get the sending stage process occurring. Okay. Now let's take a look at the traffic here, see if we can spot some differences. We see the initial TCP handshake since in ACK, and then immediately we don't see that long string of ACKs. Okay. We see it in some cases here, but it's not nearly as much as we were seeing in here, right? Which this one has. Let's see how many ACKs we can identify in a couple of these blocks, which are already from visual inspection in the dozens. All right. So this is one string of ACKs of 10 ACKs. This one is 10 more. So these are the different segments of the second stage being transferred. 14 ACKs. All right. Here we have a big one. That's 27 ACKs. Whereas here, and the bottom is a stageless, sorry. We have here, let's see. This one is 5, 4, 10. See, there's some bigger ones here. 10, 15. Any bigger than that? Let's see. These are 20. Okay. So maybe the pattern that you can see in the wire is not so different. But we do know that there is about 200 kilobytes of a second stage being sent, right? Which is the initial difference between the stageless payload that contains that already and the stager payload that only has the 7,000 kilobytes. All right. I remember, however, which is the reason why I've been a bit confused here. I remember that traffic pattern being more evident to me when preparing for the demo and in other occasions. So that's why I'm a bit hesitant here. I would have expected to see something more back and forthy, so to speak. What we can do also is set the packet capture on the Linux side if we're feeling curious. Sean, how are we doing on time? I also don't want to keep you folks later than you normally stay, because if I know myself, we can stay here all night figuring these details. Just
we
FYI.
had Ben on the other night, and he went 2 hours. So you take
All
as
right.
much time as you want, and it's
Okay.
recorded. People can come back, watch it.
Excellent. So what I'll do is take a packet capture on the Linux side, and we can see if we can spot some differences between the staged and stageless. All right. Nocturnal like a possum. I hope he's nicer than a possum.
That is ridiculous, and I love it.
All right. So let me see what TCP dump filter I can use that is going to close this out nicely. So this one has source host target, destination host target, and source host C2 and destination host C2, port 80. Let's take out the port 81. But this is a good candidate for a packet capture. All right. Now on this side, we're going to have our stageless. We're going to clean that packet capture so we have a new one. And we'll do the same thing. We'll validate our options. We will run the stager payload. We'll save that packet capture and leave another one here that will allow us to compare the differences. Now, I will not run the top one yet so that we can, leave one for stager, one for stageless, and we can do some analysis for the comparison here, okay? So I'm going to start now the handler on port 80, all right? We're going to invoke our payload from the target machine. We're going to close Wireshark because it did not let us see the results that we wanted to see. And we're going to do stageless TCP, which is what we have set up here at the bottom. To confirm, yeah, that's stageless. Go back to our target, run it. Boom. No stage exchanged. We're going to stop this packet capture. And now we're going to do the same exact thing with the stager or the staged payload. We're going to validate the options. 166, port 80. And then we have here a stager payload. That's what we expect. We're going to run that. All right, the handler is running. And now we're going to run a stager on TCP. So we see, oh, let's run the packet capture also so that we don't miss that traffic. As you know, this packet capture has been stopped, so we can, just look at the results afterward. And let's do stager TCP. We see the traffic nicely coming in. This stage was sent, so we know that that was already captured in a packet capture. Now let's close these two and compare. All right, so we first start the exchange with SYN ACK, that is the S dot, and then ACK, that is the dot. Okay, S is SYN ACK, S dot, ACK dot. Now then we see push ACK, push ACK, push ACK, ACK, push ACK. Okay, and that keeps going on. Let's see the very beginning of the next one. Let's see if maybe they're not all that different after all, but let's take a look to confirm. This is my packet capture. SYN ACK, cool. And then immediately we see push ACK. So now let's see the difference here. We are here. This is ACK, and here already is ACK. That's the end of the TCP handshake. Good to go. Here start with the push ACK. Here start with the push ACK. Okay. The length here on the stager seems much larger in these two messages, right? We're seeing a length of 7,300. I don't know what that is measuring, whether it's bytes or what exactly. If anybody on the audience knows, that would be amazing. But one difference that we can see from the Unix-based TCP dump or packet capture is that the length of the messages in the stageless is smaller. So if we go back to our presentation for a moment, let me make sure that I'm showing the right screen. I'm going to leave these packet captures here for a moment. So let's go to the presentation. And let's take a look at this comparison chart. And now it's going to come bytes. Okay, thank you so much, Kumo Monomu. I dare your name. It's just so hard to pronounce. The network footprint of the stager payload is larger because there's extra communication that needs to occur to transfer that second stage, right? Whereas the stageless payload has a smaller footprint because everything is already delivered in that initial package that is the stageless payload. Let's see if that aligns with what we're seeing on the wire. I think it does. In the top, we have the stager payload, and as we can see, longer stream of bytes. Thank you so much for that save, Kumo Monomu. And in the bottom, we have the stageless, which has a shorter length of messages. All right. If we keep scrolling down, let's take a look, see if that changes at all. So length 128, 128, 128, 144. There's a couple large ones here. There's a couple large ones here for the stageless. Let's see on the top one. 5,000. We have 7,000, 5,000, 14,000. 29,000, 5,000, 43,000. I wonder if oh man, I wonder if these would all add up to the 207,000. Let's see if I can pull the calculator. Let's see. Let's put this to the side. Let's see if they'll all add up to that. If anybody knows of an easier way to do this with TCP dump than the caveman thing that I'm about to do, adding these up manually, let me know because that would be useful too. But let's take a look now for now. 7300 plus 5840 plus 14600 plus 14600. We're already at 42 kilobytes here. Plus okay, we're at 100 kilobytes. 150. Now remember, there was some more traffic exchange after, right? For the connection itself. It's not only the second stage. But let's see. The last thing I added, I think, was the 43. Okay, so now we're at 200 kilobytes. I like this. This is not looking bad. 387, 387, 128, 128, 500. I'm missing some of the 500s here, so that's 1,000 and 256, 202. And then we have some bigger messages here for a couple 32 kilobyte. We're already at 270 or 300 kilobytes here. Okay. Now let's see on the bottom one. We know we did more than 100, probably 400, 500 kilobyte at that point because there's another 32 kilobyte here. Let's see on the bottom one. $387, $397, $501, $144, $128. We're at 45 kilobyte. Just going down a little bit. 2,900. I'm not sure if I had done those already. But I think the point holds that there was an initial bigger exchange of traffic between the stager and the stageless. Stager being on the top and stageless being on the bottom. Now, I'm very curious about this, and I'm going to grab this and I'm going to put it on VS Code so we can do more effective filtering. And with that, I'm going to actually add this up properly. Let me be sensitive of you folks. Are you finding this interesting at all? Because I perceive myself going in one of those rabbit holes out of interest. And I want to make sure that this is useful to you and illustrating the concept of the difference between stager and stageless payloads. So Sean, I will not be offended if you stop me and tell me what the heck am I doing, but at least this is how I learn.
I'm fine with rabbit holes.
Okay, good.
I don't see anybody leaving.
Even better. So let's add this here first. Here we're going to match for the string length. And what we're going to do is capture all the lines that have that string, which is essentially all of them. So let's do something else. Let's match it again. This time we're going to delete the rest. And we're going to keep only length. We're also going to look for the other patterns like that one. HTTP and full colon is what's left. Full colon we're going to remove. HTTP we're going to remove. This is for the stager payload. Let us not forget. Now, what's the easiest way to add this up? Probably with Excel, I believe. Paste them here. And the sum is 1 megabyte. So 612, 198. That's roughly 1.2 megabyte. Okay. We're going to call that staged. Let's set up the stager one. John, we went off the script completely, but I'm having a blast. I hope you guys are too.
That's okay. I like watching your thought process and how you work. I can't
Appreciate
speak
that.
for everyone, but that's for me.
Also, don't show this to my employer because then they'll question themselves, why are we paying this guy? But you know how it goes. All right, so this is the same deal here. Length, we match by that. We delete the rest. Then we bring everything to conformity here. And we're going to match on that string everywhere. Take it out. Where do I work? I don't have a problem sharing that. I just don't advertise it on public settings much out of probably paranoia, but in an effort not to make myself a target. I work at an insurance company in the US. If you want to know, DM me and I'll tell you on a one-on-one. I'm trying to be very sensitive of that. I'm not trying to play mysterious or anything, but you know how this day and age are. Okay, so stageless. I think my point is proven. Yes. Stageless 53 or no, sorry. That's 5 megabytes, I think. That's 535 or 535 bytes, 35,000 bytes. Whereas staged is a whole megabyte. All right. So we have 500 some kilobyte and 1 megabyte of exchange of traffic in that moment. Now, take this with a grain of salt. Why do I say take it with a grain of salt? Well, as you remember, we did not measure the exact time that the packet capture was open for, right? And to have an equivalence, we would need for that time to be exactly the same, right? However, what we can do is measure the number of packets, and you can see that roughly it was a similar amount of packets, right? 77 packets for the staged, and oops, I don't know what happened here, and 67 packets for the stageless, right? So we know that roughly with a variance of 10 packets, more or less 10 packets, we have a difference in size between, let's grab those two numbers because now I want to know some more exact thing. Let's say 119.86.12 minus 53, 50, 16, 53, oops, 53, 50, 16. There's a whole difference of 600 kilobytes in transfer of traffic, okay? So obviously the point in my eyes gets proven that stager payloads have extra communications, extra traffic that in the event of, the enterprise or the adversary that you're attacking, having a network intrusion and detection system, a firewall, all of that is additional footprint of communications that you're creating with your stager payload that stageless payloads wouldn't have. However, everything has a price, right? Stageless payloads are larger, which means that we do have that additional detection surface in the shape of what's written on disk. That is, if you're writing your payload on disk. As you get deeper in your penetration testing, offensive security, red team studies, you'll realize that not all payloads need to be written on disk. Sometimes you can just load them directly into memory. This is what you'll hear referred to as reflective loading. Okay, we were talking a little bit about a form of reflective loading with the code that Mr. Stephen Fewer blessed us with. I think like 20 years ago or something for Metasploit. I think 2006. I can't remember exactly. But if you go to the repo, you'll see it, right? He does take advantage of that technique. Reflective programming is what that is called at large. All right. So without digressing anymore, is what I'm trying to get at is that perhaps you don't have the same chit chat of traffic, but you do still have to transfer that stageless payload into the target one way or another. Okay. So there's the takeaway here is that there are compromises to be made. It's just that you pick where those compromises will be made according to, first and foremost, your mission and objectives, what you're trying to accomplish with the attack that you're going to perform, but also with the constraints and the defensive layers that you're going up against. And that's where doing reconnaissance, discovery is essential, because we mentioned earlier a more obvious use here when we were talking about the different formats for the payloads in the stager, is that you need to know what system and architecture you're attacking. If you don't know that, then chances are you're going to pick the wrong payload, right? If you're just guessing. And at that point, if you're a red teamer and you're doing something more sensitive in terms of not being caught, that can cost you your stealth or your cover, like they call it, right? Like they know you're there, and that element of surprise sometimes it's what makes it or breaks it. I like where Vulcanil is going about Sun Tzu and the art of war. Those things certainly apply in here, because at the end of the day, we're attacking computers, but computers are used by humans. So it's usually humans what we abuse and the mistakes that they make. All right. Sean, I'm getting very poetic at this point. So I recommend you pull me out of this.
I like
Because
it. It's
otherwise,
soothing.
we don't know where we're going to end up with me. But I have to say that this session went completely in a different direction than I was not expecting, and I was able to also learn something with you folks, which is it's not rare, right? I'm not any more knowledgeable than any of us are. We all have our strengths. West gave me a very nice overview of the things that he's been studying for physical security, right? And I learned a lot from him. So one thing I wanted to share during this stream or this session today was that, without going into details, I want to encourage you to always be humble, but never let someone make you feel less or make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about, or like you shouldn't be in the room. Because, at least in my individual experience, what got me in the room was being curious, being humble, and taking advantage of the help that was freely offered by others that wanted to help me, right? And then obviously being very diligent to maximize that help. And what do I mean by diligent in this case? Well, I'm following some of the training from Pentester Altered Security, like Nikhil Mittal. Okay, I'm doing the red team courses that he has, and he said something this in the video that I was watching this morning, that it was like, there's no dumb questions, but there are lazy questions, right? And a lazy question is something that perhaps you can Google. However, I do believe that there is a nice way to say that and a way that's not so nice or not so constructive. And that's where this message is coming from. I know in my heart I wanted to share that with you today, because I don't know where you are in your career, whether you're starting, you're a seasoned veteran. We've had some veterans join in previous live streams, but I do know that that's something that has helped me carry through in my career, and not feel uncomfortable or feel like I don't belong in the room because there's people that are much smarter than me. I work with folks that, man, I almost feel sometimes like, wow, I have so much to learn from these guys, right? So you should never feel, like your knowledge or your experience is less. It's just a matter of diligence and continuing to learn. I wanted to share that message with you today.
I
Sean,
think
I'm
that's
I'm going
a
to pull
beautiful
myself
message.
here before I start crying,
I,
because this gets all emotional.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you've been a great friend and mentor to me, and I appreciate you coming for us. And it takes a lot of work to prepare something like that. Do you want to do one more quick? Anybody have any questions before you leave, or any questions for the man? Once, twice.
I'm not charging for the answers yet, so
So that starts tomorrow. I have
tomorrow.
two quick things to share. If you guys are here studying for like the PJPT or the PMPT, um, I think the sale ends today. I just put the coupon code for TCM in the chat. It ends today. I'm pretty sure it ends at midnight to get 20% off purchasing your certifications. And then one more quick thing from me before we go. I'm going to share my YouTube in the chat. So if anybody came late, had to leave early, I should have the video ready by sometime tomorrow or maybe even tonight because I don't sleep. I'm not a possum, Ray, but I don't sleep.
I'll do a shameless plug as well to our link tree. I figured out about this application, so that way I don't have to be pasting 15 links. You just go in there, support us, reshare our content. Our mission here is to share freely what we know, the little things we've been able to experience, and hopefully they are of use to you. So,
Looks like we have one more
how does
question
interpret
in
avoid
chat.
posting dialogues or locking due to user interaction needs? Posting dialogues. Um, can we invite that person to go on audio so that it's easier to understand the gist of the question? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Um, hey,
Hey there.
I think
Yeah. Can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. To try to clarify my question was do I had some notes. Okay, so when you're using the meterpreter, I don't actually know how to pronounce that.
Interpreter.
Meterpreter?
Yeah.
Meterpreter? Okay.
Yep. You got it.
Sure. Um, Effectively, you're accessing the sorry.
Take your time. It's all good.
I gotta get my
I'm gonna put my speaker up a little bit
my
just to
note
make sure.
really quick. So okay, yeah. So you're accessing, like, for instance, the WinINet, and ordinarily the WinINet is going to post, so any like interaction that goes to the WinINet has a tendency to post like a user interaction dialogue.
To be quite honest, human information hazard. I love your question, by the way. You're going deep in the weeds. Okay.
Okay.
I
Sorry.
would have to do some no, all good. I'm glad to, because that invites me to look at something, and I'm going to learn something by trying to answer your question. But to be quite honest, I'll have to get back to you into seeing the normal behavior of the WinINet library, or
Mhm.
what that function usually does when it's not used in an abusive manner like it is to establish a callback in a C2. And
Sure.
then I'll have to compare how it is implemented for the Meterpreter or C2s in general, because Metasploit is not the only C2 that I know that implements that function. So I'll literally have to get back to you. And if you're okay with that, post either your LinkedIn or add me on LinkedIn, or what we can do is you can send me also a Discord friend request if you don't want to,
Okay.
get IRL type of thing. And I'm cool to, do all the research I can. I'll ask around the folks that, are more brilliant than me or that know about that specifically, and I'll do my best to come up with the answer for you. But at this moment, I am not sure I have enough knowledge of the WinINet library or, that functionality to tell you, this is how it behave normally versus how it behave um, in the context of interpreter, right? And if anybody knows in the audience, also please,
I
help
know
me
nothing.
out. And yes, well, can I always bring another point also that I think I got to hyper focus on WinINet on your question. So user interaction, right? In terms of a payload, generally for a C2 framework, if all goes well, you won't see the user that you're targeting, right? Like your victim, let's call it that way, though we don't do things that are, victimizing anyone. Um, as professionals, won't see anything happen in their system. It will be
Right.
just another program. And of all the programs that are normally running in a system, it won't even be the heaviest or largest program, if that makes sense, right? Like these callbacks are very if they're properly written and for the purpose of doing these operations in real life, they're very small. They actually call them implants, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a small agent sending back and forth information to and from the system, right? But that's a great question, frankly. And these are all things that you should keep in mind because I'm going to go into a very specific example, but just to give you an example in which something does happen that is visible to the user. Okay, so just let's use two examples. Let's say that you landed a target that clicked on your payload,
Okay.
and it landed you with low level privileges where you still need to perform the privilege escalation, so you have system level privileges, which are the highest privileges you can have on a system, right? One of the ways to do that, barring any other controls or mechanisms, is using the user access control. User access control is that thing when you're installing I don't know if you play video games on your computer, or when you're installing a program, like let's say you're installing Skype or Zoom to talk to your family member, right, or your friend. When you're installing that, sometimes it asks you to run it as admin, or a pop-up comes up and says, this program needs administrative privileges. Click yes or no to grant or deny. And that is a way to elevate privileges. So you can sometimes trigger that from certain C2 frameworks. I believe Metasploit might have a UAC functionality so that you can trick the user into clicking it, or some other C2 frameworks have a bypass for the UAC where you will get that to occur without the user having to click it, right? And that's one instance in which something needs to happen at the user side, an interaction, for you to obtain your purpose or objective, which is to elevate privileges. However, we just want to also, for the sake of completeness, let you know that there's also opportunities to bypass that as well, right? And the other one I was thinking about is, let's say you're landed in that same user, right? You landed in that machine. You haven't done the thing about the UAC, so forget about that. Now you landed on their machine, but you don't have their password. And let's say you have low privileges, so you cannot dump the passwords from the memory of LSAS is the process, but you cannot dump the passwords is the greater point. So what you can do is instigate or create or coerce an interaction between the user and the computer so that user puts in their password and you can capture it. And that's a way of you can do that by ways of a fake login screen that will take the whole screen and would prompt the user in a form for their username and password. And that's one very effective way of capturing some credentials if you don't have them, because you would just then have to run another program, right, that will pop up that screen and capture the user's input. But at that point, you depend on the user putting the right password, which sometimes they don't. So the Windows fake login screen seems like Malik is familiar with. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I sorry, I was saying yes.
Does that give you some more context and or make it a little bit more useful or paint some color into the because I understand too, when going on this from the concept overview and just doing a demo might not put all the pieces together. That's something that obviously comes with time and seeing many of these things done. But does that help at all?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a guess that they like have intentionally crafted the string to avoid any pop-up. Does
Could
that
you
make
repeat?
sense?
Could you repeat that one more time?
So they've intentionally crafted the string to not whatever actually is injected to avoid the pop-up. And it does
But
that
are
make
you talking?
sense? Do you see
Are
what I'm
you
saying?
talking? Are you talking about a specific example, or you mean in the situation where the user you're prompting them for credentials and they put the wrong
Right,
thing?
right. Where there's incorrect credentials.
Yeah, if that were the case, then tough luck, right? Because then you're not getting the right credential. What you could do also, if you're more crafty and have like better knowledge of the internals of the operating system, is prompt a legitimate logging that will go and actually check
Mhm.
the credentials, and then you're using a keylogger at the same time, and then you capture that input, and you know that the system validated that the credentials were valid, and what you're getting on the keylogger is high fidelity. Does that make sense?
So just like patience is a virtue, huh?
Say that again, sorry.
Patience is a virtue on that. Just check again,
Oh,
basically.
dear, patience is a virtue in in this whole career. I'd say two things: patience and persistence.
Okay.
Obviously, knowing when to persist is important because you don't want to brute force the same thing over and over and over and over and give yourself out, right, and be caught. But certainly, patience and persistence, two virtues to have at the forefront of your mind when studying these things and when doing them in real life.
Thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
I appreciate it.
Red Knight, did you have a question or did you just want to hang out on the stage?
Yeah, I actually I have a question. I'm sorry
Is
I
it
came
going
in.
to be about Hashcat?
No,
Okay,
no.
alright,
I
go ahead.
figured
I just wanted to
I
mess with you a
figured
little bit. I saw you over on TCM earlier having trouble.
yeah. I was in the Discord group on Hashcat and I was told that it seems like my Explorer extension kind of renamed the hashes that I save. So if I save it as hashes.txt, um it comes out as hashes.txt.txt and rocku.txt.txt. So I have to type it that way for it to come out. Or I type hashes
Well,
and
I'm
the
glad you
TXT,
figured out a little bit, at least a workaround.
Yeah. But the question I want to ask is, during the exam, do we simulate our own attack or is it already all simulated?
You're talking about during the PJPT exam?
Yeah.
Um, your environment's going to be all set up already. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, because for instance, while doing the LMNR poisoning, where we, try to, fat finger and click on the this thing, are we gonna do it ourselves or
No.
is all
I can't speak for TCM, but
okay?
I can just say that if I were to create an exam environment like that, I would have scripts running to simulate user
Oh,
activity.
okay,
I hope
gotcha.
that helps.
Yeah. Thank you.
And just to make sure I'm not misleading you by answering another question, the scenarios that I was sorry, I'm gotta cough. Really sorry. I don't know what happened. The scenarios that I was answering with the whole credential capture and user access control bypass might or might not be in this exam at all. Okay, I just want to make that very clear, just in case you're asking about the user interaction being simulated. Like, because when you're doing like hack the box, and I don't know if try hack me rooms have this, but sometimes you have to fish on a user or have the user to do something. And like Sean was very well saying, what these training providers do is that they have some script simulating that user because as you can imagine they don't have somebody clicking on something for every one of us that's using the lab.
That's what
Okay,
Tony
I
actually does for work. He works at Hack the Box and just clicks phishing emails. I wish he was still here for that.
I'm gonna tell him that. Just wanted to make sure, Red Knight, because I would hate, last thing I would want is for you to go, down a rabbit hole of preparing some scenario that you're not gonna encounter for the exam, right? That wouldn't be fruitful.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah. Anyone else has some questions for us?
I think I think we ran out of questions.
The demo issues could not stop us tonight, Sean.
No, it was
Last
really great.
minute, I'm
Even
clicking
watching you
start.
work through that though.
Thank God that the math added up because I was like, I hope this is gonna work. Um, Last minute before I'm joining, I'm click start virtual camera. OBS is like, no, not doing this. And I was like, great. So
Mine actually worked well, and I also streamed to YouTube, or I'm sorry, LinkedIn tonight as well.
awesome.
And that worked from OBS.
Great. I promise I'll have it figured out by the next one. So you're not seeing this. You were not supposed to see that.
It's all good. You got my wood.
That's some quality wood right there.
All right, I guess we'll wrap it up, folks. Thanks for coming. Next week, I think we're gonna start working through Wreath on Try Hack Me next week. So you're gonna get to watch me fumble a lot. That should be fun.
Well, folks, for those of you presenting for the PJPT, all the support to you, all the encouragement. Remember, be patient with your studies, with yourself, and persist, like the persistence that you do in post-exploitation. But you want to keep trying. Failing a certification means nothing, and doesn't matter who says it. And really, you fail when you don't want to try anymore. That's my opinion. So, Sean, thank you so
Sorry.
much. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about it. But I have a question. I think when I was reading the exam preparation, I think I read something about if someone runs into like a deadlock, they can get clues or something. Am I right or no?
I can tell you. So again, I don't work for TCM. I just hang out with some TCM homies. I can tell you that if you fail an exam, but you still go through with like preparing a report and all that, you can get clues for your retake.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Have a good one, guys.
All right. Good night,
And
everyone.
gals.
I'll see you for Thirsty Thursday.
Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.